Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about primarily the developments when it comes to the ceasefire. For the first time, it's Israel that's talking about a positive sign and a positive move and the closest point ever that we have reached to a ceasefire, with certain moves coming from Benjamin Netanyahu himself that are indicating that we are indeed close to a ceasefire, alongside statements coming from the US administration. And the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is a confirmation from Yemen that they attacked the Israeli targets yesterday. They were the ones who targeted them, alongside another attack that they carried out on the US aircraft carrier and multiple US destroyers in the northern part of the Red Sea. I'm going to start off with the first topic, which is the ceasefire. So there were a couple of reports in Israel. One of them was reported on the Israeli Broadcasting Authority that Qatar delivered a positive message from Hamas to Israel and that the PM convened an urgent discussion. Now, when it comes to the actual ceasefire and the ceasefire talks, what people need to understand is any development coming in the ceasefire is a development that is within the frame that Hamas dictated from the beginning after the temporary ceasefire. Hamas saw that Israel breached the initial agreement that they had with the temporary ceasefire, and they did not want a repeat of that. There were multiple offers on the table for Hamas to agree to another temporary ceasefire, but they did not want to accept it because they didn't want to put the Palestinian people in the same position they were in before, where they have a temporary relief, but Israel can go back and start committing genocide again and more destruction against the Palestinian people. And that is indeed what's happening. The only difference that's happening is within the details. Now, when it comes to those details, it's only very minimal. What is being published both from the Israeli side and from the Palestinian side is very minimal. Yesterday, we spoke about a blackout phase that has been imposed in Israel, from discussing details about the ceasefire and the small changes that have been agreed upon by Israel and Hamas. Today, there was another confirmation coming from Hamas, particularly Osama Hamdan, who's a senior figure in Hamas abroad, where he had a statement from Algeria saying that they will also not be talking too much about the details when it comes to the ceasefire. And his reasons were they do not want to give Israel any reasons to say certain things that would potentially harm the national security of the Palestinian people and the national unity when it comes to the Palestinian people, without elaborating something along those lines. So what was reported today? We had this article today popping out just a couple of hours ago in Israel, saying that according to foreign sources, Israel agreed to move forward with the negotiations on the second phase of the deal in parallel with the implementation of the first phase, with the goal of creating a continuum until all hostages are released. American officials have called it the best deal Hamas will ever see, but a major obstacle is the lack of guarantees linking the phases. Now, when it comes to the actual phases, these ceasefire talks are primarily to do with a full ceasefire in Gaza and ending the war. Israel wanted only a temporary ceasefire, committing to an initial first phase where they do not give any guarantees in relation to the second phase. However, Hamas said that's something they cannot accept. They're willing to accept a multi-phase deal, but not a deal that would only be restricted to one phase of the ceasefire, where Israel would be continuing the war afterwards. And these reports are coming from Al-Arab Al-Jadid in Qatar, that said that Qatar, of course, sent Israel all of those details when it comes to the ceasefire talks, a positive response coming from Hamas submitting a new message, and the negotiations, according to that report, reached the closest point ever to in agreement. They also added that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened an urgent discussion with Defense Minister Israel Katz and the negotiating team. This is something very significant. The fact that Benjamin Netanyahu did not have a meeting with the cabinet but with the negotiating team is also a sign that we're closer to a ceasefire. Why is that? Because the cabinet includes people who are more resistant to a ceasefire prospect, people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, people who Netanyahu did not really give a lot of information to previously. Now, the fact that he's meeting only with Katz and the negotiating delegation, that means that Netanyahu might have an agreement with the negotiating delegation, who already showed in many previous cases that they are willing to agree to a ceasefire. Although some people have changed when it comes to the negotiating delegation, but core figures inside of the negotiating delegation remained there, and all of them were in favor of a ceasefire, unlike Benjamin Netanyahu, who at one point accepted the ceasefire, but then was reluctant. What is this ceasefire we're talking about? We're talking about the same ceasefire that Joe Biden proposed, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to that ceasefire, and the same ceasefire that Hamas previously accepted, alongside minor details when it comes to the initial phase. However, these details, based on the reports that are coming, they are not going to be changing a lot of things. Hamas is still insisting on not giving Israel details about the people who they would be releasing. They would give them information day by day, and that is primarily to secure themselves and not reveal all of their power cards primarily. According to foreign sources, the report added Israel expressed a willingness to reach significant agreements already in the humanitarian phase of the deal. The parties have reached an agreement in principle to negotiate the second phase in parallel with the implementation of the first phase. This is a key point here. That means Israel is willing to give more from its own side as well when it comes to the first phase, alongside guaranteeing a continuation to the second phase. Now, a lot of things depend on the wording. People need to know that the wording of the actual ceasefire will be in 3 languages. It will be in Hebrew, it will be in English, and it will be in Arabic too. What Israel will be trying to do is interpret certain things or translate them in their understanding, or in Hebrew, for example. That would be different. So alongside the development when it comes to the negotiations themselves, Hamas would have to check everything in much detail and confirm everything in the multiple languages that the agreement will be in. Israel also confirmed in this report that, similarly to previous talks, there will be talks about the permanent ceasefire, with the goal of having a continuation between the phases, starting with the humanitarian release in the first phase, and at the end releasing all of the Israeli prisoners of war alongside the Palestinian prisoners too. That's something, again, that Netanyahu insisted on not having before, but Israel is clearly now understanding that they're going that way. They also added that without any agreements between the parties on ending the war, Hamas will not accept the deal. That is finally sinking in when it comes to Israel, that we cannot basically tell Hamas that we are having a ceasefire, but that ceasefire will not have an ending of the war, a confirmation of the ending of the war. Then they added in this deal that, according to sources, this is a fair deal for everyone, a multi-phase deal, and one that guarantees the return of all of the hostages. What does it mean, returning all of the hostages, and at what point will all of the hostages will be released? Previous reports stated that the heavier Israeli prisoners, so that means top military figures from the Gaza division who were kidnapped in the early hours on October the 7th, after Hamas took down the whole division, including commanders, all of them will be left to the last second. In the first phases, it will be females, potentially non-combatants at the time, and then we will be talking about the release of the men and the army personnel inside of Israel. They added in that report that it has been also reported that Hamas might be sending a list of certain names that would potentially be released. That's something that Hamas did not really guarantee. Another problem that they're talking about in the negotiation talks is the fact that all of the negotiations are happening with the Hamas leadership abroad, not Muhammad al-Sinwar, the brother of Yahya al-Sinwar, who is leading the show inside of Gaza. Now, the acting political bureau leader of Hamas is a man called Khalil al-Hayya. Khalil al-Hayya, he is overseeing the negotiations, but the de facto leader in Gaza, who has the biggest weight really, is Muhammad al-Sinwar, the brother of the late Yahya al-Sinwar. Another point that confirms that Hamas is indeed sticking to all of its requirements when it comes to the ceasefire and that they're negotiating from a position of power is the fact that the White House spokesperson said that Hamas is making it difficult. Why? Because they're being really tough with the negotiations, but that they believe it's possible. The fact that they're saying Hamas continuing to be tough in the negotiating table clearly signals that Hamas is negotiating from a PowerPoint, from a powerful position, despite the fact that Israel is trying to increase the genocide inside of Gaza to be used as leverage against the Palestinian resistance and try and withdraw more positions and more of what they want from Hamas. Now, what are Israel threatening with? Israel's threatening with an escalation that would eliminate Hamas. According to the same report, Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, or more accurately, the genocide or war minister, he instructed the IDF to come up with a plan, to present a plan as soon as possible for complete defeat of Hamas in case they do not agree to a ceasefire agreement in 10 days. And they need to be optimistic as well. And at the end of the day, we do need to end the war, but we need to have a plan to try and defeat them. That's all a threat coming from Israel that is really baseless. All that Israel's been doing for the past year, 15 months, is trying, hoping to defeat the Hamas without any luck. At the end of the day, they used everything they can. They have more resignations now. The deputy IDF chief of staff handed his resignation. He's going to resign next month. That's also a big indication that we're very close to ending the war, because senior positions at that level usually do not resign. It was members of the war cabinet who resigned. Some certain figures in the IDF, well, senior figures in the IDF, but not the highest level of the IDF. Top figures in the Gaza division, in the West Bank brigades and divisions of the Israeli army, alongside the team of the Israeli army spokesperson. However, the IDF chief staff still there, despite many disagreements with him and Netanyahu, now with a new defense minister. But the fact that his deputy is resigning is also a signal that we are very close, and he does not want to continue during this period. So this is the most significant report yet, the most significant news about a genuine prospect of a ceasefire with Gaza. Again, there are certain things that need to be concluded, absolutely. However, according to the mediators, according to the US administration, and even according to Hamas, we are very, very close to a ceasefire. And indeed, the deadline that has been given to Israel, which is before Donald Trump becomes president, could be actually in effect, and Israel could be going for a full ceasefire very, very soon with the Palestinian resistance. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about is there were more attacks coming from Ansarullah against the genocide state. Today there was a declaration coming from Yahya Sari', the military spokesperson of Ansarullah, saying that it was Ansarullah who targeted Israel yesterday, and they targeted Israel with three drones, on occupied Jaffa, on military targets, on strategic targets. Again, we spoke about this yesterday. There was no confirmation from Ansarullah yet. However, now they're confirming, and they said that they succeeded in this attack. Israel said they intercepted them, but Ansarullah said that they succeeded in the attack. They also added that they again targeted the USS Harry S. Truman again. They targeted the US aircraft carrier again, and they had a successful targeting when the aircraft carrier was present in the northern part of the Red Sea. That's something significant, because in the majority of the attacks, the aircraft carriers were closer to the Yemeni shores. Now, Ansarullah already expelled and forced the US aircraft carrier to retreat, like they did with Abraham Lincoln and Eisenhower too. The US at the time, they said they had to go through some sort of maintenance in the United States, and then they brought Harry S. Truman. Also, what Ansarullah said is that they took down another attempted attack on Yemen. So from their perspective, they're going all out in solidarity with Gaza, saying that they will continue to perform their duties towards the oppressed Palestinian people, and that their operations will not stop until the aggression stops and the siege on the Gaza Strip is lifted. Now, in Israel, they already admit that they are facing many problems when it comes to Ansarullah. They're facing problems when it comes to knowing the locations of the senior figures of Ansarullah in Yemen. They're facing problems in finding the strategic weapons of Ansarullah, although they are now conducting joint operations with the Genocide Coalition, the United States and the UK inside of Yemen. However, these attacks are proving to be completely ineffective, because Yemen has been attacking Israel every single day, and they have been attacking Israel for the past 15 months. Day after day, sometimes they would have a slight break, but they have been the only front outside of Gaza that has been constantly open against Israel, and one of the most effective fronts against Israel in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Ansarullah in Yemen forced the Eilat port to go bankrupt. They hurt the Israeli economy drastically. They led the world's largest credit rating agencies to downgrade Israel. They took down their grading by twice already, Moody's at least, with a projection of more decrease in the future. If Israel has one more decrease, and by the way, this decrease and a reduction in their credit scoring is unprecedented. It's the first time in history that it happened. And if they reduce it one more time, especially Moody's, that would make Israel a location that is not worthy investing in. This has dramatic implications on the Israeli economy, already suffering very heavily. And all of that is due to the Yemeni front. Yemen disabled Israel's economy. They attacked every ship that is linked to Israel. They attacked Israeli ships. They attacked US ships. They attacked the Genocide Coalition. They took down 13 of the US's most advanced drones worth hundreds of millions of US dollars. Again, money that the United States is spending to serve a genocide entity with a war criminal wanted by the ICC. spending taxpayers' money on them instead of spending that money helping Americans suffering from hurricanes and mass fires now in LA as well. So Yemen is continuing. However, the Yemeni front might stop. When will they stop? Well, if we do reach a ceasefire in Gaza, that means the Yemeni front will stop its actions. At least if they see that the genocide stopped, indeed, they would need to verify it. And also that the siege is lifted. So from a Yemeni perspective, they want an ending of the war, but they also want to see all of the aid going into Gaza. And by the way, that wouldn't necessarily mean that Yemen would stop with the first day of the ceasefire. They would probably see how things go. If Israel conducts an attack, they might continue. Now, from a US and Israeli perspective, if they do reach that ceasefire and the Yemeni front stops, that would be a major relief for them at the end of the day, because that really exhausted them, all of these attacks, and Israel would have a relief when they can reactivate their trade from the Red Sea that is crucial for their economy. Many economies in Israel have been hit really badly, especially when it comes to imports, importing cars, for example, and even the property market as well faced a big crisis, especially because Israel itself started to prevent laborers, Palestinian laborers from the West Bank from working inside of Israel. They tried to counter it by bringing some workers from India who immediately went back home because they were complaining about the conditions that were coming in Israel when they were working. However, will that be the last or the end of it when it comes to Yemen? Not necessarily, because what Israel faced from Yemen in the past 15 months is something that they never faced before. This level of activity, this level of attacks, consistent attacks, hurting Israel economically very badly, targeting successfully genocide bases and strategic locations inside of Israel. Israel knows these things, they will remember them. So they will probably have a certain plan to attack Yemen at one point. And again, even if we do reach a ceasefire, that wouldn't mean the ending of the conflict. The conflict will not be ending until there is a full answer and a full solution for all of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. That includes the Palestinian refugees, that includes Palestinian statehood, that includes equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea, and that also includes holding people accountable who committed war crimes as well. And those things cannot come very quickly. All of these things would take time. However, following 15 months of full-blown genocide coming from Israel, that subject will not disappear off the headlines if we have a ceasefire, for example, next week or the week after. And from an Israeli perspective, Yemen will continue to be a threat. Likewise, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran, and well, the whole region is now witnessing a reshaping in the whole region. Israel's recalculating the threats in the region, the changes that are happening as well. But there are also certain things that Israel might be rewarded with if they do have a ceasefire that could potentially lead to a greater solution. What is that? That is the deal with Saudi Arabia. There was already a deal proposed for Israel from the Biden administration back in April 2024 that he refused. The Saudi government, they initially declared, or the Saudi crown prince, that the Palestinians would need to have a state for Saudi Arabia to have official relations with Israel and have a peace treaty with Israel. However, several months after that, there were reports, and we spoke about them at the time, so approximately over a month ago, that actually Saudi Arabia changed their mind, and it's only now a ceasefire. If Israel does indeed have a ceasefire, they end the war with Gaza, and there is a somewhat of a solution, they would indeed have a peace treaty with them. Now, the Saudi government denied that. They denied saying that we will have a peace treaty with Israel only for a ceasefire. However, with some of the reports that were coming out from multiple media outlets, there were indications that something will be starting again with Saudi Arabia. Donald Trump, don't forget, he led what is labeled as the Abraham Accords with some Arab states in Israel. But one key country was Saudi Arabia that hasn't been agreed upon and reached yet. Now, Saudi Arabia, from their perspective, they're in no rush to have a peace treaty with Israel. It's Israel, by the way, which is seeking relations and normalization with some Arab countries. And the fact that they only did it with a handful of countries in its entire history proves how much of a failed state and how much of a foreign body it is to the region of West Asia. So whenever there's a country that actually does have a peace treaty with them, and that peace treaty would only be at a governmental level, by the way, the people did not make peace with Israel. For example, with the Egyptian people did not have peace with Israel. Likewise with the Jordanian people, they did not have peace with Israel. And even with any other new countries that Israel had peace treaties with, you're not talking about the population, because at the end of the day, the governments that did these, had these agreements with Israel, they do not really represent the people. But saying that if Saudi Arabia does have it, even if we don't have, for example, a government that's representing the people in Saudi Arabia, that would be something very significant for Israel. And that's something that can happen down the line. But again, there are no guarantees, and there are still denials coming from the Saudi side when it comes to anything to do with a peace treaty with Israel. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this video. I hope I added some beneficial information for you and shed some light as to what's happening. And I will hopefully see you soon in the next video. Peace.